Atrial fibrillation and heart failure, a clinical conundrum by Deepak Padmanabhan. This is an interesting topic.
At the outset, I'd like to thank everybody for being here on a Sunday morning, listening to something like this, especially when we have India versus Pakistan in the afternoon. So, thank you for having me here. If the last talk was sparking discussion, this is probably the most controversial talk of this morning right now. And my apologies if I go over time. But this is something I'm very passionate about, so let's just talk about it. The objectives for my talk, and I'm basically going to talk about atrial fibrillation with heart failure. That's about it. That's the subset that we are talking about. We're going to talk about the differences in pathophysiology of atrial fibrillation in all the different subsets of heart failure that we have. One important question, atrial myopathy and how it is influencing anticoagulation and the discussion we were just having. What is the logic of rate versus rhythm? Are we in the generation of rhythm control only? And then extreme rate control and what is this delta interval variance that we keep talking about? And finally, the various ways of rhythm control. If you've documented that rhythm control is your way to go, what do you want to do to rhythm control your patient? And finally, some unsolved questions. This is the ABC pathway. Atrial fibrillation better care pathway, its outcome in Asian patients. And you can see, if you can avoid stroke, if you can actually ensure that it's better symptom management, and there is cardiovascular and comorbidity management, which in my opinion is the most important part of managing atrial fibrillation, cardiovascular and comorbidity management, you can actually decrease death by all cause by 58%. If you look at the confidence interval, it is 0.31 to 0.56. We are nowhere near 1. We are nowhere near like 2 difference or 3 difference. It is all-cause death going down by 58%, cardiovascular death going down by 63%, ischemic stroke going down by 45%, and major bleeding going down by 31%. But for that, you essentially need to have atrial fibrillation better care integrated approach. It's not a single point. It is not one guy starting anticoagulation or Deepak Padmanabhan trying to ablate these patients. Why are we talking about all this stuff? Now, let's talk about the physiology. In the left atrium, the material of the left atrium per se, the quality of the muscle, the atrioventricular coupling leads to some kind of minimum left atrial volume. When there is pericarditis or there is some kind of pericardial restraint, it results in an increase in the left atrial pressure volume curve. The normal curve is essentially at this level where you have the LA volume curve. But the moment you get LA myopathy, in order to ensure that you have the same LA volumes so that you can actually give your good cardiac output, the pressure at which this happens, that pressure level actually goes up. So you're shifting your LA volume pressure curves to the right and upwards. This is how you maintain the body circulation at that point of time. Now, when you do that, in sinus rhythm, you're still fine. The moment you get atrial fibrillation, that basically goes up through the roof because obviously you need to kind of account for the heightened pressure within the left atrium in a non-compliant chamber. So this upward and rightward curve actually is persistent even in rate controlled atrial fibrillation. You cannot say that atrial fibrillation is there, I have controlled the rate, but it's the ventricular rate you're controlling and not the atrial rate per se. As a result of which, you develop what is called LA myopathy. And this LA myopathy is an independent predictor of CVA, independent of the AF burden, and more importantly, if you look at Cochrane reviews, is independent of the use of anticoagulation. So, the moment you get persistent atrial fibrillation, you have LA myopathy, even if you are on anticoagulation, you are at a higher risk for stroke. And that is the problem that we are trying to talk. The vicious pathophysiological cycle exists between atrial fibrillation and acute heart failure, to and fro, the yin and yang as they try to call it. Eventually, you lead to a state where one is dependent on the other, and we are talking about chicken and egg all over the place. The pathophysiological differences between the two types of heart failure that we are talking, HFrEF and HFpEF. That is where we start to diverge. Where you have HFrEF, there is greater eccentric left atrial remodeling. There is increased left atrial stiffness in HFpEF. There is no remodeling, but you become more stiffer. AF is more likely to precede heart failure than to follow heart failure, especially in HFpEF. AF is less tolerated in patients who are predisposed to HFpEF, and therefore AF is the trigger to diagnose, hey, I think you have HFpEF. In our place, we are trying to kind of counteract this by doing strain for everybody above the age of 40, and it is not uncommon to see poor reservoir strain in these patients. Mortality is obviously high in patients with HFrEF who develop new atrial fibrillation compared to patients with HFpEF who develop new atrial fibrillation. And finally, pre-existing atrial fibrillation occurring before heart failure is less associated with mortality. These are the pathophysiological differences. And now we'll talk about the management based upon what is the kind of heart failure that we are talking about. What is the evidence for the same? AF in HFrEF basically can either contribute to the worsening of pre-existing heart failure or can cause tachycardia-induced myopathy itself, where the HFrEF is essentially an electrical phenomenon. Most of the times, it's a combination of the two. It is a diagnosis of exclusion when you're talking about tachycardia-induced myopathy. It requires the improvement of ejection fraction with rate control or rhythm control. And the clinical cues usually are rapid ventricular rates with a non-dilated ventricle, no palpitations, and an otherwise normal ECG. Sometimes they may be associated with polygenic or monogenic mutations. The titin is usually the gene that is implicated in this. What happens though, it worsens. When it's a secondary cause, it worsens pre-existing heart failure. It is incidentally present in 4% in NYHA class 1 with HFrEFs and in 50% with class 4. And there is clear data there in this subgroup to suggest that sinus rhythm has better prognosis. There is no question about rhythm control versus rate control here. It is always rhythm control here. The question is, how do you do the rhythm control? AF in HFrEF increases hospitalization. New onset AF is more prone to increase hospitalization as compared to permanent atrial fibrillation. Beta blocker has poor efficacy in permanent atrial fibrillation. You probably want to do digoxin, but the problem with digoxin is that you have to figure out the intervals or the range in which the digoxin needs to be kept. ARNI does not decrease AF in paradigm HF. SGLT2 did not decrease AF in DAPA HF. Amiodarone, AF-CHF trial, 82% rhythm control without mortality benefit. In SCUD-HEFT, you are worried because 44% of them had increased mortality, and therefore you have got to be careful with amiodarone. Higher bradycardia, obviously higher CIEDs and decreased beta blockers. Tofetilide is now available with us, and we need to have our own clinical experience with it. But otherwise, it seems to be a great drug, especially in patients with HFrEF. Coming now to the AFFIRM trial of our generation. This is the EAST-AF-NET4 trial where you had early onset atrial fibrillations who were treated with medications or with ablation to ensure rhythm control and compared with patients who underwent rhythm rate control with apparent medications. Ablation was performed in only 25% of these patients. This was new onset AF within the 1 year of diagnosis that you kind of randomize them to rhythm control. And this actually documented you had significant mortality benefit in these patients, decreasing the number of recurrences and hospitalization of atrial fibrillation. Digoxin plus bisoprolol for heart rate control in atrial fibrillation, the rate AF showed no significant difference between 16 outcomes, including resting heart rate. Now, coming to catheter ablation in AF and HFrEF, it is the best way to maintain sinus rhythm. CASTLE-AF documented that. Cabana in the intention to treat trial suggestive of benefit, especially in patients when they had lowered atrial fibrillation. This was the Cabana heart failure sub-study. This was the EAST-AF-NET4 heart failure sub-study. In the HFrEF group, there is no question that your ablation decreases the number of times you have hospitalizations and has mortality benefit. Now coming to the cherry on top of the entire cake, the CASTLE-HTX trial, where you took patients who were on the transplant list, randomized them to ablation versus other methods of maintaining normal rhythm, and found that in patients who had catheter ablation, the study had to be stopped by DSB board after randomization was completed, even within the first year itself. That's because the hazard ratio for the usual way of managing these patients was worse. It caused more mortality as compared to catheter ablation. So in all phases of HFrEF, early HFrEF, late HFrEF, you did have significant benefits in managing it. What strategy in the circa dose trial, when you use cryo, you did find that there was benefit in even preventing the progression from paroxysmal atrial fibrillation to persistent atrial fibrillation. So what do you do in HFrEF? Younger and early natural history, possible consideration of AICM, intolerances to AAD and rate control, early signals that progression can be managed. RF seems to be better than cryo in this subgroup. There is improvement of valve regurgitation, and there are natural history studies that suggest that the more time you spend in permanent atrial fibrillation, the more you have tricuspid valve regurgitations. So your HFpEF patients who have permanent atrial fibrillation eventually will end up coming with tricuspid valve regurgitation and signs of right-sided failure, where it's a complex interplay between the pacemaker lead, the atrial fibrillation itself, and the problems with right-sided heart failure. Eventually, patient choice is a problem. The HFrEF with AICM or arrhythmia-induced cardiomyopathy, camera MRI was there, showed that actually there was benefit, especially in patients with absent LGE on the MRI. Amiodarone can be used as proof of concept to document AICM. AVNA remains second-line therapy in this group. Why do I still talk about AVNA? If the patient has a wide complex QRS, atrial fibrillation, and has had one episode of heart failure in the previous year, and the treating physician deems that this is permanent atrial fibrillation, ablating the AV node, creating the delta level variance to practically zero, actually helps you with mortality benefit. This is what I mean by the delta level. The RR interval variability that exists in atrial fibrillation can be contributory to the tachycardiomyopathy itself, and taking it out completely in the form of ablating the AV node perhaps is useful, but it actually remains something that needs to be done with care, especially because pack changes need to be done over and over again. Now, coming to AF in HFpEF, the problem of our generation, it's essentially systemic inflammation to a very large degree. Lifestyle remains the challenge. There is abnormal myocardial modeling. LV diastolic reserve is down. There is independent left atrial myopathy that can happen in these patients. Therefore, you get poor LA compliance. There is congestion in the pulmonary vascular bed. There is something called atrial MR, and LA dilatation happens, leading to a higher restraint because the pericardium really has not given way, or the pericardial creep has not really happened. This is seen in the form of exercise capacity which goes down, which in turn leads to furtherance of the HFpEF physiology. So the implication is that you need to document symptom-rhythm correlation, which remains critical, use of LA reservoir strain as early as possible, as much as possible, and institute lifestyle interventions for these patients. And in our cohort of patients over the age of 60 who developed atrial fibrillation, we saw amyloidosis was present in 15% of these patients. That remains an important subset to diagnose. How do you manage? Alcohol cessation, weight loss, lifestyle intervention, avoiding caffeine. Just a couple of minutes perhaps. Is it okay, sir? Just a couple of minutes. Yeah, just a minute. And then SGLT2 inhibitors, we don't really know the mechanism. In permanent atrial fibrillation, beta blockers are greater or better than digoxin, remains to be documented. NOACs remain critical because there is LA myopathy. There is no long-term trial for HFpEF and rhythm control. East AFNet showed signs that maybe it's better, but we don't really know. This was a randomized trial with very few patients, which documented the peak exercise capacities, the peak relative VO2s, in HFpEF patients for catheter ablation, just hypotheses generating, but nothing more. This remains a diagnosis that we need to make more often. Atrial mitral regurgitation, because even with mild mitral regurgitations, these patients do badly when atrial fibrillation supervenes, and as such is documented by an atrial push of the valve leaflet as compared to a ventricular sagging. So you don't have any data currently to delineate causality, but these patients don't really do very well. Early rhythm control is likely to be beneficial, but remains to be documented in randomized control trials. So what are our guideline recommendations for rhythm control at this point? Patients who are younger, patients who have a shorter history, patients who have more difficult to control heart rates, smaller left atrium, but more LV dysfunction, and bigger the valve regurgitation, more the benefit with managing. And it remains a class 1 indication for patients with HFrEF, a class 2A when you have patients with HFpEF. LB, left bundle area pacing, instead of just doing an AVNA with a right ventricular apex lead, is still under evaluation, but is still something that probably will change over a period of time. And therefore, I'd like to summarize AF in HF by saying that greater than 50% of patients with HFrEF or HFpEF will develop atrial fibrillation. In a patient with HFrEF, tachycardiomyopathy needs to be worried. Secondary AF, because of the heart failure itself, needs to be there. But AF itself can cause mitral annular and tricuspid annular regurgitation, and therefore you need rhythm control there. When you're attempting rhythm control, catheter ablation at this time seems to be better as compared to drugs in terms of frequent recurrences, more management of the atrial fibrillation burden itself, and perhaps there is an early sign that we may prevent progression to permanent atrial fibrillation. In HFpEF, the problem is the left atrial compliance. There is myopathy. There is risk of progressive atrial fibrillation. Itself, HFpEF is underdiagnosed, and the presence of atrial fibrillation itself is an intermediate grade risk factor to document that you need to prove that the patient does not have HFpEF, and exercise testing in the lab perhaps is the way to go. Catheter ablation may benefit, then prevent the progression to permanent atrial fibrillation. Thank you for your absolute patience. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Deepak, for excellent way of giving all the inputs about the atrial fibrillation and the heart failure. Even the first episode of atrial fibrillation or flutter, which happens in a patient of elderly person with HFpEF, and they become quite symptomatic because I think there is no backup and immediately they become symptomatic. How do you treat the first episode of atrial fibrillation and patient is quite symptomatic?
So my logic depends on whether there is HFpEF or HFpEF.
Yeah.
If you are in atrial fibrillation, it's your first episode. If your EF has not gone down, you are okay to convert the rhythm and place them on medication, lifestyle intervention. But if your EF has dropped, that means you are going for HFref physiology. The moment you go in for HFref physiology, my first choice is ablate the patient. In a HFpEF physiology, I want to institute the lifestyle first before I try and do something. And there are enough and more rhythm control drugs. Again, the concept of rhythm control does not need to mean ablation. It is just cardioverting the patient. Even cardioversion, in my opinion, is an important intervention in patients who have atrial fibrillation. Whether it is permanent or otherwise, cardioverting that patient itself is pretty useful. And then you can use whatever drug you want. Today, India remains one of the only countries where dofetilide is available. Dofetilide is not available outside the United States anywhere. We have dofetilide. So we need to build up our own experience with it and actually commit ourselves to maintaining sinus rhythm. That is a commitment that we need to give and not ablate or commit to a therapy.
Especially, I think what you have mentioned regarding the patient who have got HFpEF patient with first episode, I think cardioversion becomes a quite a good.
Yes.
People are a bit worried, but I think patients should be counseled and they can be cardioverted, and maybe after cardioversion, patient may remain in sinus rhythm for years to come. So that's quite a good option.
Deepak,
Well, diagnosing-
one thing is, sorry, Dr. Khalid, I'll just then. Over a period of time, we understand the limitations of ablation
Yeah.
in our country.
Yeah.
Why it is? It's a specialized process. It's not like a pacemaker implantation or angioplasty where you learn easily, and you need perseverance in doing this. Now, but still, it is a way forward, no way to ignite. My question is that why there is no study over period of time about other class 1 drug antiarrhythmic for atrial fibrillation prevention or recurrence? What do you think? It's just not been done, or all it is a
We had
failure?
East AFNet. East AFNet 4 was essentially 75% of patients on amiodarone. 75% of your patients were on amiodarone for
Okay.
follow-up. Ablation was just a part of the story.
And
And
other
they did better.
class 1 or class
Flecainide, you can always try. Dofetilide, you can always try. But you want to match David with David, not David with Goliath.
Now, one important thing is somebody is on flecainide,
Yes.
doing well,
Yes.
but in sinus rhythm,
Yes.
and over a period of time you found that ejection fraction is dropping.
Yes.
Then you have to stop or you continue.
Absolutely. You stop.
Yeah.
You have to find out why the ejection fraction is dropped. Sir, my problem is we need to figure out the substrate before
All
we
are
do
not same.
any intervention, whether it is coronary or non. I mean, there was a beautiful paper, I think, in circulation done by Dr. Parag Bhaviskar, who's gone to University of Minnesota. He documented a thought process via MRI called mixed cardiomyopathy. Ischemic and non-ischemic. Just because the coronary artery plaque or the obstruction is there, we can't deem them to be ischemic cardiomyopathy. There is non-ischemic progressors. So, in my opinion, and I can be absolutely wrong about this, my apologies, is if you have non-ischemic cardiomyopathy or the suspicion of a non-ischemic cardiomyopathy, in today's day, unfortunately, you cannot make a good diagnosis of a non-ARVC, non-HCM patient without doing an MRI, a PET, a strain, and unfortunately in the last 1 year, a genetic study.
Yes.
Because patients with positive PET results have been seen to have genetic positivity for LMNA and filaments. It is essentially a stress response of the myocardium. We are thinking it to be inflammation. But even with genetic cardiomyopathy, there exists a stress response which will uptake PET by itself. So without these four, figuring out what the NICM is remains a problem. And especially in your case, the one example that you gave, you have to stop the flecainide. If you are getting HFrEF, you figure out. Because atrial fibrillation, when it comes back, it is going to worsen it.
Yeah. Kalita sir.
Sir.
Just
Very
one
commonly
point.
we use
Yeah, so I want to re-emphasize the words said by Deepak. When East AF trial came in 2020, I think there was a mass hysteria about, oh, rhythm control is better than rate control, and the F1 was wrong and we are right. And everyone took on the face value of the trial that we have to go for ablation. So majority of these patients were on medical therapy, and that has to be re-emphasized to everyone. So rhythm control doesn't mean always ablation.
No, it doesn't. See, sir, sorry. Go ahead.
in atrial fibrillation, as you have mentioned, if it is a HEPAP, then once it is a practical question, we have to remember, because for HEPAP, commonly we use anti-proBNP.
Yes.
In atrial fibrillation, it is always high, and I do not know the cutoff level whether it is being put or not.
Exactly. Exactly. So that is where the strain comes. Your reservoir strain is down. That means your atrial myopathy.
Deepak, a quick question. Any experience of intravenous ibutylite? Ibutylite.
Ibutylite?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's something, the way to do it is to restore sinus rhythm. Whether you do it with ibutylite, whether you do it with cardioversion, whether you do it with 2 patches of cardioversion, doesn't matter. Last month, and I hope to put it out hopefully by the end of this month, we conducted what was India's first AF conclave. We didn't call electrophysiologists, we called surgeons. Surgical outcomes for the MACE procedure, and let this sink in, surgical outcomes for the MACE procedure in long-standing atrial and permanent atrial fibrillation at 5 years for sinus rhythm is 74%. It is 74%. So the commitment has not to be to ablate the atrial fibrillation. That is not the commitment we are looking at. The commitment is to essentially ensure our patient remains in sinus rhythm. I get asked this question, my patient has CKD. What is the advantage of doing sinus rhythm in that patient? Now, if you take 2 patients of CKD, one of whom is in atrial fibrillation and one of whom is not in atrial fibrillation, guess who is going to do better? The one in atrial fibrillation is going to do worse. So, looking at what the substrate is, what advantage, the worse the substrate, the better it is. Heart transplant patients started doing better and got off the transplant list. How much more better do we want our patients to be? So, sinus rhythm, not ablation, sinus rhythm. Sir, sorry.
Thank you, Deepak.